So thank you, Deirdre. So doing that investigation, I said, all right, let me try to play with AI a little bit. And that's what led me down this road. As I started playing with the AI sandboxes, started playing with the Firefly content generation tools, I started taking notes of all the things I was doing, and I was having a lot of fun doing it. So I brought the information to my manager and asked if my team would like me to present the material. That went pretty well, and someone heard about it. So then I ended up at the here at the IT Academy presenting this material. So this is a presentation I'd given in the past. I'll go through it all. Feel free to ask questions. Just know that I'm not the expert. And as was mentioned, we have Paige and David here to help answer any of the technical details there. So this is a presentation for using generative AI to improve how we work. This is an intro to AI from a beginner for beginners. When I created this presentation, I was trying to figure out how can I create a presentation using AI? Can I get it to create my scripts for me? Can I get it to create my content for me? So what you'll see is each of these slides here in this slide deck, each image was created using Firefly, the Adobe tool that we have in Hewitt. And Paige was the expert in that area. So any questions, we can start directing those to her. But for each of the slides that I've generated, I put a little prompt at the bottom to let you know what I typed in, what I needed to do to make it visible here and make it look the way it does. So this first one here, I wrote into Firefly, and I'll show you the Firefly tool. I'll show you ChatGPT and Claude and what those tools are, but we'll start with the image generation first. So I created this slide by typing in some text saying, create a high detail, realistic close-up of a person sitting at a large table in an enclosed office with charts and graphs in the background. And what that did is it created that image that you see there. It's a person sitting there. It's pretty high definition. It looks great. I'm in data, the data team, so we've got charts in the background. I thought that was pretty fun for my team. There were some things I needed to do to make it kind of fit in the PowerPoint, so I cropped it in Paint. I used Adobe Express. I didn't even know that we had access to that, but as I was playing with the Firefly tool, I noticed that we had some additional tools available. So you can take your content, move it in there, and I'll show you how that all works. And I was able to create this graphic with this text here. And I was like, I don't really like it. So I moved on and I asked it a similar question again. And I just wanted to change the look a little bit. So I changed it. I told it to be mathematical formulas in the background. I changed the wording a little bit to say, how do we get from here to there using generative AI? I created this image. This person, it showed their full body. He had 3 legs. It was kind of odd, not quite a real person. So I did some editing again, trimmed off his extra leg. I cropped it again, and then put it back here in my image. And I still wasn't happy with it. So I said, all right, how can I get AI to help me with this a little bit? So I wrote in to the AI assistant, and I was asking it, what are some interesting and fun titles for a presentation on how to use AI assistants? And these were some of the titles that it came back with. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. I think I see it there. So I chose the second one, AI Assistance 101, a crash course in training your virtual BFF. I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's my new best friend is this virtual AI tool. Let me choose this one. So I created this image here, created this futuristic billboard, put this on it, but I still wasn't happy. So then you see these are the prompts that I used to create it. So I went back to the drawing board, played with it a little more, and then I came up with this one here. And this is it. This is my starter deck, the starter of our deck. We finally made it to a real title page. So this is called Using Generative AI, Learn to Work Smarter by Thinking Less, and Learn to Work Faster by Working Less. So I thought that I liked this close-up image. I liked the way that all this looked. But I think, continuing on. So yeah, we finally have a title page thanks to generative AI. And don't forget me, I helped a little. I didn't create this image. But that was a lot of work. That took me several hours of iteration of kind of going back and forth, changing things, trying new text prompts. It was work, but it was fun work. Um, so as we go through this, I want to show you how I got there. A lot of these things can be done really quickly, but just keep in mind that some iteration is required in order to get you to those like final results that you're looking for. For me, AI isn't always faster, but I think it's better. I get to iterate a lot more often and kind of get to a more polished end result. And I'll show you how that looks here. So now we're ready to get started. So my topics for today, I'm going to go over what is generative AI. We'll talk about creating content from your imagination. Then we'll go to the second section. Well, that's when we'll start talking about what Claude is, avoiding hallucinations, learning to use the tools with no training, and then how to do AI-led training. So these are kind of the topics that we'll be, or the tools that we'll be looking at. So Adobe Firefly for that first section, AI assistance for the second section, and then just leveraging AI itself in that third section. So going into the generative AI, just for a heads up, if anyone isn't aware, like what is generative AI anyway? So there's different types of AI. There's like automated tasks that you can create that are repetitive. There's like the future of AI, which is like general AI. It's when AI itself can realize and solve problems on its own without us having to feed it content and context. But what we're talking about here is generative AI. We are passing content and context to this system, and it's going to churn through that and come back with some output that we can use, whether that be like text, video, audio, photos, but you're getting some information back. So just continuing on that, there's different aspects to generative AI. Underneath the covers, it's using these generative models, the large language models. It's large data sets using different either machine learning or different techniques to kind of parse through that information and have that available to put your context information to provide you information back. It uses creativity, so it's taking all that information and to whatever degree of information you gave it or questions you asked it, it's going to come back with some creative answer. And there's uncertainty. Always keep that in mind that just because you got this back from the AI tool, it doesn't mean that it's accurate. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. So there are levels of checking and making sure that what was provided back to you is accurate. So keep that in mind, and we'll talk about that further as we go along. So what is an AI assistant? So thinking about the AI assistant itself, I like to think of it as like Clippy. When you think of like Microsoft back in the day, you'd have Clippy, everyone's favorite thing, popping up all the time, asking you questions, seeing if you need help. It's not jumping in your face. You got to kind of search it out a little bit. But if you go there, you can start sending your questions to the AI assistant and it can help you along. It's great at natural language processing. Give it you can give it questions and words in your language, whatever that is, and it can understand that, comprehend it, and then pass it back in whatever way that you want. You can change the style of the way that the information is returned as well. You can say, give me this information back as if I were a high schooler, as if I were an eighth grader, and it can kind of limit it down and make it more comprehensible for you. It provides information to users, so you're sending it questions kind of like a search engine, and it's giving you information back. But we'll talk a little bit more about that and what the differences are there. It has clarifying capabilities, meaning when it gives you information back, it can, depending on how you ask it, it can give you some context around that to explain what its limitations were and the information that it gave you, or any other details surrounding it. And it's not a general problem-solving tool. So you are using it to, it's taking information from you directly and coming back with answers to your problems, to your questions, but it's not going beyond that. So keep that in mind as well. So what is Firefly? This is the first tool that we're going to talk about. A firefly itself is a type of insect that can produce a flashing or glowing light, but Adobe Firefly is a web-based artificial intelligence tool developed by Adobe. I created this prompt here on the right. I asked it to create a high detailed image with a beautiful crimson and gold firefly hovering above a flower in the night. I was like, oh, let me get something really beautiful in there. And I created like a dragonfly. It's not quite a firefly. So I played around with it a little more. And if you look on the right-hand side, I tried my best, and I could not get it to create an actual firefly, which I thought was funny. So the tool Firefly that creates amazing images can't seem to create a firefly itself, but it can create some other amazing things. So don't take that as too much of a negative. So if you look down here at the problems in the blue, I created this slide back in April. I played with it a little today. It got a little bit closer today. It wasn't perfect yet, but it's getting better. But what is Firefly itself? So Firefly is an image recognition tool. It can recognize objects, scenes, text, and all these different elements of an image within the tool itself. It has a lot of stock content, which is really nice as you go into Adobe and Firefly and later into like Adobe Express. There's a lot of content available for you to bring into your images and manipulate things further. And we'll do some demonstrations there to show you that. It's great for integration, so it works well with the Adobe suite of tools. Paige may know all of the tools that are available with it, but I've used it I've definitely used it in Express. I think I played with Photoshop and Illustrator a little bit, and I'm not sure if it goes beyond those tools. And it's a cloud-based service. So as an AI service, it runs in Adobe's cloud, so users don't need any specialized hardware or machine learning expertise. So what is Adobe Firefly? I just continued on. So let me bring you into the tool itself, and I'll show you what it looks like. So what I'm going to do, I'll try not to make it too fast, but I'm going to toggle between my browser and my slides so you can see what I'm talking to, and then I'll actually run some commands in Firefly so you can see how things get created. So when you log into Firefly, you would typically click here in the top right-hand corner, but I logged in ahead of time just to make sure it was ready for the class. But where this login button is, there's also your profile information. And one thing I noticed is it has a certain amount of credits that you have per month. Paige, I don't know if that is something people need to be aware of. I've used a bunch of credits. I got down to like the 500 range at some point, but I never exceeded it.
Yeah, I'll add quickly. So the Harvard community is allowed 1,000 generative credits per month. So Harvard faculty, staff, students, researchers, you get 1,000 credits a month. They don't roll over, but they renew at the end of the month. When you reach your credit limit, you won't be blocked, but you'll be slowed down. So that's just something important to know. So you just want to pay attention to how many credits you're using. But yeah, thanks Anderson for showing everybody, or thanks Shanton for showing everybody sort of where to find that. So
yeah, no problem. Thanks for clarifying. So let me go back to my slides. So if you were to log in, you would just go to firefly.adobe.com and you would log in using the sign in button at the top right. Since I'm not going through it, I'll at least put the screenshot here for you. So you would click on sign in down at the bottom. So you have all these different ways to sign in, but you scroll to the bottom to the sign in option. And then here you would type in your Harvard email address, and that will pass you through Harvard Key so you can get logged in. So just keep that in mind. If you log in, you have to go to this bottom login in order to get past a Harvard Key. But once you're in, it'll take you into the interface for Adobe Firefly. So what I'm going to do to get started is I'm going to leverage this prompt that I used here. So let me just scroll down a little. This way I can copy and paste to make my life a little easier. And I'm just going to copy and paste the same prompt I used here. So I'm going to take super detailed image of a university that is amazing with students standing in a courtyard enjoying the sunshine. What I've learned is the more detail I put in an image, the better the results are that I get back. So that's why there's so many words there. So coming in here to Adobe, right in this bar right here in the center. I'm going to paste that text and click on generate. So what that will do is it'll come back. That's going to churn for a second. So let me go back to my slides. Um, and in this example, it created a couple of images of high detailed people. One thing to keep in mind from my experience is when I create an image with one person in it, it's beautiful. It's really high level detail. It looks amazing. Two people looks good. Three people, yeah. Once it gets above three people, the image quality for the people that it comes back with it starts to degrade more and more. And I don't know if those are settings that we can play with, but just from the beginner perspective, that's my experience. Just if you really want a good looking photo, try to keep the number of people in the image to a lower number. So these are the results that came back. So you can see here, not great quality images compared to what we saw here, but we do have some images available to work with. So let me go down. So my next prompt was, all right, this is kind of what I want, but I wanted to really show that we're at a university. I want to get a cap and gown on these people so I can really show that we're at a university itself. So I can say, adding text here, a student in a cap and gown. And I'm just typing this right at the bottom of the search results from the first one. And I don't think I changed anything else in this example. So once I type that in, I just hit generate. And it's going to just take those new words and then create it again using those results. So that just takes a moment. And while that's churning, I'm just going to go back to my slides. Okay. So now it's getting better. You can see when I click in these, this is a more realistic person in this particular example. Here's a neat one, very visual there. This one's neat. So these are all pretty good. So I think I could work with these. What I want to do next, and you have options here. Actually, let me show you this instead. If I didn't want it to be like a photorealistic, like if this looks like a real person, if I wanted to make this more like a cartoon art, what I can do is I have the option of changing my content type. So this is currently set to auto, and it will create the best image it can using either art or photo from whatever text I gave it. But if I wanted this to be more cartoonish, what I would do is I'd switch it to art rather than photo, and I could just generate that again and have it come back with new results. So I just switched it to art, and you can see that right down here in your breadcrumbs for your prompt search, you can see that art is listed in here. And there are other things that we can add, and you'll see that every time we add more context to the search, it'll add different breadcrumbs here for you. So these are similar images, but you can see that now they aren't like a realistic image. They're more cartoon-like. So I really like this one. I think this one's neat. So we might use that one. So go back again. So here, one of the challenges I see here is that it often creates things in a square image rather than in a widescreen. So if I wanted to use this in a PowerPoint, this square image may not work well for me if I want to take up the whole page. So another thing I'd like to do is I like to come in here and change this from square to widescreen. And then I have to run the query again. So give me 1 second there. And by doing that, it's going to change the image as well. So I keep saying, oh, I like this image, but forgetting that every time I change something else, it's going to regenerate images again. So now these are the new images, but now in a widescreen view. One other thing I like to do, and I see I did it here, is you can also use these reference images down here. So these are like reference structures, reference styles. Again, I don't know all of these in detail, but I'm going to click on this reference here, and you can see that it shows up as a structure reference. And I really like playing with these styles as well. I love this like multicolor pinkish background. So I'm going to use that as a style. And you can change those as you can increase the intensity of them and the strength. Same with the structure. So you can play with these a little bit as you're trying this tool out. But after you choose those items, you see them here in the breadcrumbs, you just hit generate again. And you'll see stylistically, it's going to change the way that that image looked. So as that comes back, it just takes a moment. See, I really like the way that this looks. So this is perfect. This is exactly what I'm looking for. So here I can click in it to get a better, like a larger view of it. I can click around to see which one I like the best. But each time it's going to create 4 images that I can select from. I really like this one. So let me go back. Just looking at my slides again. If I want this image, if I'm done, all I have to do is just click on that image and click download. And that's it. Now that image is downloaded to my PC, it's ready to use. But if I want to continue further, I can actually go to this edit option within Firefly to now change the way I'm working with this tool. So I can click on edit in the top left. And there are all these different options. You have your generative fills, generate similar. I couldn't tell you what half of these things mean. But what I like to do is I come into this edit window and I go to this option here. It actually used to be different. So this menu has changed a little bit. I used to go to apply filters and adjustments, but now that option is gone. So I simply just go to add shapes and graphics. So when I click that, it's taking the image that I created here and it's bringing it directly into Adobe Express. So the two are integrated with each other. And now it's the same exact image, but in a different tool. I'm no longer in Firefly. So going back to my slides, there's all different settings and adjustments that you can do within Adobe Express. But the first and most important thing is I like to just give it a name. I like to save the file. So here in the top left corner, it's going to create the name as just untitled with your date. So let me call this graduating from Harvard. Okay, so now that's the name of my file. And if I wanted, I can go to this icon here where it says your stuff. And that's where all of my saved projects are. But I'm just going to stay here in the tool and I'll continue working. So the next thing we can do is if we want to add additional content, we need to click away from the image. By default, you're clicked, or I guess typically in the past, you were clicked on this image and you were given all of these adjustments and settings based on whatever view you're in. So the view I'm in right now is I'm clicked on the image, so I'm getting permissions for that image itself. But if I want to kind of work with the entire canvas and not just the specific image, I just have to click away from that image. So by clicking away, I'm just going to swing back again. One thing I like to do when I use Firefly is to remove the background. So these are kind of like layers. If I wanted to just have the person without this beautiful background, I can highlight that image itself, highlight the image itself, and I can click on remove background. And because it was created in Adobe, it actually knows what the background is versus what the front layers are. So I got rid of the background, but I got stuck with these plants. So sometimes you can play a little bit and remove those things as well. But I'm realizing, no, I like that background. Let's keep it in there. So if you want to undo something, you have your undo buttons in the top, or you can just do Control Z like any other tool or most other tools. So I'm going to bring that image back, but I just wanted you to know that that removing background is there. Continuing on, what I want to do is I'm kind of thinking this as this is like an advertisement or like a photo I want to send out to some people. So I want to add some text to this. So if I click away and I click back over here in the left pane on the text option, you get all of these kind of like default templates that you can add to make this look really nice. So all you have to do is click on one of them, and I'll just click here. And that by default will automatically add this text box here with all the template items available. And you can see that each one is a different part. When I click around, I could change text in this window. I could double click here and change the text here. Each one is its own separate part. So what I'm going to do is I'll call this one graduation, called graduation day. And I don't really need this block anymore, so I'll just, get to click around. So I'm going to click this block and just delete it. I don't want that one there. I'm kind of moving things around by accident, and I'm just using Control Z to get things back to where I want them. So now that this text box is here, I can see I can click away, I can highlight it, and then my layers are over here on the right-hand side. So this is the text, and this is the image. I want to kind of resize this a little bit. So I'm going to just change the sizing of it. But you can also, if you wanted to directly, you can play with these fonts, the colors by clicking on the object itself. You double click it, and now you're into the text itself. So you can change fonts, you can change the sizing, but know that that's there. And looking back, moving it around. So I added some text, but what I'd like to do is add some graphic images as well. So I can also go back to this sidebar and go to the media section. And under media, I want to put in a photo, and I want that photo to be like one of those like celebration horns that you see as like an emoji. So let me type celebration. If I can spell it properly. And you can see as I'm typing, it actually is giving me different suggestions of other things I could put in there as well. I'll say celebration horn. And if I look through here, you can see I can find all these different types of images, but this is the one I want. This is what I'm looking for. So if I click on that, it automatically brings it into my my canvas here. And it has a white background. I don't really want that white background. So like we talked about before, I can highlight this and just remove that background from it. And it will remove the white background from the horn. So now I have this available to me. Just a little bit of white in there. That's something we can play with later. But if I wanted this to just be in the image somewhere, I could move this around and put it in there to create or finalize my image. But just as a quick and dirty, creating something very fast in Firefly, that's what we've done here. You can save this image off. You could pass it along to friends or whatever it is, or colleagues, but you just hit download in order to save that image down. So before I move on to the next section about the AI assistant tools, are there any questions about Firefly? For hands? Don't see any.
Shannon, I posted 2 knowledge articles in the chat too that'll be
Oh,
helpful. One on how to access Firefly and the other on how to monitor your generative credits. So
great. Thank you, Paige.
yeah.
So that's the first AI tool. So the second one we'll go into is we'll cover the AI sandbox. So the second section here is about AI assistance. So many of you have probably heard about the Hewitt AI sandbox. So we used a Firefly to create this fun image. Thinking about generative AI and AI assistance, remember, keep in mind that not all of this information is protected when you're using it in the real world. So if you are using Gemini, if you're using ChatGPT, if you're using any of the other AI tools available to the general public, when you're using those tools, your information that you're typing in there is getting saved and used in those tools and could be later used for the future of their products. So what we've done here with the Hewitt sandbox is to kind of create a walled off location that will use or will keep our information protected so that it's not going back to those tools. One thing to keep in mind that the Hewitt sandbox is secure for up to data level 3, DSL 3. So if you had DSL 4, you shouldn't be putting it here in this environment today. If you wanted to know more about the Hewitt sandboxes, I think I can share, Deirdre, I can share these later, right? These slides with the links in them. Yeah, so we can send these links out later, but this is a link directly to the AI sandbox information. So when you come in here, it'll tell you about the different AI sandboxes. It tells you about the different the large language models that we're using here. So you have OpenAI, GPT-3, 4, 4.3. So there's all these different versions. And I believe there's a new, and David, you can answer that. I believe there's a new iteration coming out soon in the nearest future, near future of where it's kind of like the second iteration of this sandbox.
That's correct. In the next 3 weeks or so, there'll be a release of Sandbox V2.
Awesome. So with Sandbox V2, it'll add some new features, and we can maybe talk about that in a little bit. But this is the Hewitt AI Sandbox. So within the sandbox, as we just mentioned, that there's different large language models. So thinking about the difference between the LLM, the large language model, and the AI assistant, the LLM is more of like the back end. That's where all of the data sets, the algorithms, it's like the back end repository for everything that you need to make this work. The AI assistant is your interface to access that LLM. It's the point where you are typing in the information and it's coming back and being kind of scrubbed through to make sure that it meets like this is it's trained using techniques called constitutional AI to avoid potential harms like spreading misinformation. So it's coming back in a kind of polished way so that it's not doing harm for the most part. And these are just some examples of different LLMs versus AI assistants. But we're going to talk about Claude. So who is Claude? So the default AI assistant that we use in the Hewitt Sandbox is Anthropic's Claude Instant. So Anthropic is the company and Claude Instant is the tool. Claude was trained using constitutional AI, which involves self-supervised learning techniques to encourage helpful, harmless, and honest behavior. So it's just reiterating that when you read about most of these AI tools, they try to emphasize the those things like helpful, harmless, and honest. But just remember that whenever you use these tools, no matter how helpful, harmless, or honest it's trying to be, you still have to look at those results and make sure that that information is correct. When I first got into the AI sandbox, I was like, okay, I can't wait to get in this thing. And then I clicked on it and I said, oh, this is like DOS or Linux or just like a Unix prompt. I wasn't overwhelmed, but when I started using it, I was. So that little offset there. But this is Claude. You come in, it's just a text box, and it's there, and it's ready for you to start typing information. All right, so let's do it. When you go into Claude itself, when you go to AI Sandbox, Claude is the default AI assistant, like I mentioned. But if you click on, let me go back. If you click on this, actually, let me get logged in. That's what I prefer to do. Go to the Hewitt AI server. I'm logged in. So when you click on this little preferences button right here, that will pop up your large language model settings. And here you can change it. So if you didn't want to use Claude Instant, you could do Claude 2.1, any of these ChatGPT ones. You have Palm 2 Bison. But I've been using Claude Instant. It works well. It comes back with fast results, and they've been pretty accurate for me. So we'll keep it there. You also have these temperature settings. These help to both make it faster results coming back to you, but also determines how creative the tool is. And creative could be good, it could be bad. So if you were looking to write a fiction novel, you may want to put the temperature way up here to like 8 or 9. But if you're just trying to get simple factual results, maybe you want it down in like the 2, 3 range or something like that. 3 is the default. And every time you come into the tool today with this version 1, there aren't any preferences. So if I changed this to ChatGPT 4 with a temperature of 8 and I confirmed it, when I log out and I come back in again, it's going to be Claude at temperature level 3 again. I don't know if that is something that's changing in the next iteration, but I believe there were their preferences for that next version. So coming in here, you could change that if you'd like to, but I'll leave it as the default. You also can get your history by clicking here. You can show your history. But what I'm going to do is kind of go through some of these examples that I use this tool for. So the AI assistant it's great, but it's not a search engine. So you have to kind of keep that in mind as you're using it. I don't use this for everything I would use, like Google or Bing or whatever search engine is your preference. You you have to kind of consider the way that this works. If I were to ask Claude, what is the weather going to be like on Monday in Cambridge? It doesn't know that. It's going to come back. It says, unfortunately, I don't have specific weather forecasts for individual dates and locations. Here's a brief summary of the typical weather in Cambridge. And it can kind of give you some predictive temperatures, but it can't tell you what it is. Because this tool isn't doing like a search on its own. It's not going back and scrubbing the web to find out what the weather is today. These large language models have been built, and when they get created, there's kind of like an end date to the information that was available to it. So if this language model was, say it was finished in July of 2024, or sorry, January of 2024, it doesn't have information for July. It only has information up to January. So it's limited on what it can return back to you. When the next version comes out, it'll have a new date, and that will have information up to that date. But as the months go on, it's limited, and it'll lose information going forward from that point forward. So if I wanted to figure out what the weather was going to be like in Cambridge, I really want to use the search engine for that. I don't want to use AI. So when is it good to use AI then? So when you're doing like common sense reasoning questions, and I put some examples here, like what would be a thoughtful gift to bring to a dinner party? That's great. AI can parse through the information and it will come back with lots of examples. And it's a really helpful tool for that kind of a question. If you wanted to synthesize information from different sources, so what are some trade-offs between owning a car versus using public transportation? It's great at that. It can take all the information about both scenarios, compare them, and give you information back in a nice, easy way to read and parse through. If you asked it some hypothetical scenarios, like what would happen if all the insects disappeared, it can come back with that. It can take the information that it sees in its language model and bring that result back to you and give you some good answers. You can also ask it things about concepts at a basic level. So what is inflation and how does it affect economy? And it will tell you not just the definition. It won't just like a search engine would say, this is what inflation is, but it will kind of give you some examples to go along with that. And then another one is you can test the capabilities or knowledge of the assistant itself. So here are some questions I wrote, like which programming language were you created with? How can I provide feedback to improve you? Or what are good questions to ask an AI assistant that are not good for a Google search? So what I really like about the AI tools is you can ask it how to ask it things. You can give it questions to help you learn how to use it better. Actually asking it which program language was created to build it, I think that actually, there are certain things about itself that it won't answer for you. I learned that through time. But the other two questions are definitely things it would reply back with. And I've used the latter one many times, like what are good questions to ask the AI assistant? And it will come back with different ways where you can, teaching you how to use the tools. What I use AI for the most, though, is summarizing content. So I get a lot of I think we all get a lot of emails, but I get a lot of really long, lengthy emails, and I read slowly. It takes me a while to parse through all that information. And I love to just take that email, copy it, paste it in here into Claude, and I'll ask it to summarize that content for me. And there's different ways you can do it. You can ask it to do it in bulleted form. You can ask it to give you so many sentences, but you can ask it to summarize content in different ways for you. So this here is an article about security problems with AI, and it's on different web pages. So one thing I said is summarize the following in 4 bullets in a comprehensive way that an 8th grader can understand. So that is the first part of my query here. Then I copied the information from these pages and I pasted it at the bottom of this search. So you can see that here. So this was the question. And then below it, these are all of the details that came from those web pages. I just pasted right below it. There may be better ways to do this, but again, I'm a beginner. So I did this all in one single question. And then you hit the run button, and it comes back and it says, hey, here are 4 bullet points summarizing the key points in a way that an 8th grader can understand. And then it is giving me the summarized information for those pages. I find this to be super helpful and something I use a lot because I don't always want to read through these long emails, or it might be a vendor email that I'm interested in, but I don't want to spend the time to go through it all. But just there's always that caveat. Whatever you use this for, don't always take it for granted that it's accurate and that you got all the information that's important there. So I like to take this information, read through the bullets that it thinks are the most important, and then I like to go back and kind of skim through the email just to make sure I didn't miss anything else. So I'm not reading it in word by word, line by line, but I'm trying to go through just to make sure that it didn't miss anything that I personally think was important. Other things you can do is you can ask it to provide follow-up questions. So once I've run that query about the privacy, it has that in its memory. It's kind of cached there, and it understands the context for what you're talking to. So then you can continue your questioning. You can say, based on the summary, are there things that I should do to protect my data when I use generative AI? And then it will understand what you already asked it, and it will continue from there, and it will provide a new answer. So it says, yes, based on the summary, and then it gives me some additional bullets. So it's still using that same style of bullets because that's what I preferred, and it's continuing on with that inquiry. But again, as I say it every time, just make sure you validate those results. But you also have to be careful when you're using it. So there was an example where I was using this tool a lot for summaries. So I get emails, they're long, I copy paste them, summarize it, I'm getting excellent results. Then I was starting to get these videos. Here, watch this video. It has this important information. One time I got a video that was like 20 minutes long. And I was like, I don't have 20 minutes. Maybe I can make AI summarize that video for me. So I did that. I went here to the link and I said, please summarize the video found here about Adobe Firefly. And that was my question. I put the link there and it was like, sure. Here is a summary of the key points from the video about Adobe Firefly. Adobe Firefly is a new AI assistant, et cetera, et cetera. And it's telling me all these great things about Adobe Firefly. And at some point I realized whatever it was giving me wasn't accurate information for that video. The context from what the video was versus what I was getting back didn't seem to match. So then I watched the video and I looked back at the results and I was like, no, it was completely wrong. So one thing to be careful with is AI can hallucinate, right? So it can take information, churn through it, and it can come back with wrong information in different ways. So how does this happen? So if the training data is insufficient, if it's out of date, if it's biased, or it has low quality information, then the information you get back may not be good. And the hardest part about AI is you don't get breadcrumbs. You don't have a way to know how it came to its answer. You are typing information in, you're getting information back, but there's no in between. There's no way to understand how it got from A to B. So if the model was too complex or under complex, if it didn't match up, then you may have got bad information back. If your prompt was bad, if you didn't have good information in your prompt or not enough detail, then you may not get good results. Same with the context and programming, insufficient programming in the model may not be able to handle every scenario given to it. So like I mentioned before, those are just things to keep in mind when you're using these tools. So don't take it for granted. It can tell you lies. What I like to do is I like to probe at the AI if I see something isn't coming back the way that I want it. So one thing you can do is you can just give it a thumbs down. So when you're using the tool, it gives you a thumbs up or a thumbs down to kind of guide the tool in different directions to let it know if it's giving good results or not. So I'll give it a thumbs down if it's incorrect. And then you can also just ask it questions. You can say, this is not accurate. Why did you provide this information? And even though there aren't breadcrumbs, it'll try to give you some logic as to where it got its information from. So in that case, I had asked it, I said, that information wasn't correct. Why did you give me that information about Adobe Firefly from that video? And it said, yeah, you're right. My previous summary was not accurate. I do not actually have access to view or summarize that YouTube video. And then it goes on to explain why it doesn't have access to the video and that it kind of inferred or made an assumption based on the context of the question I asked. So what I like to do is I like to kind of push the tool to fit my preferences. So even though we can't store and save preferences in the tool today, what I like to do is create these little queries or prompts to keep it guided towards my style. So here in this example, I just said, please do not make any assumptions going forward. Please summarize the video found here about Adobe Firefly. So I told it not to create an assumption anymore. And then I just asked it the same question again to see what it would do. So in this scenario, it said, oh, I apologize. Upon attempting to view the video, I received an error saying the video is not available. So now it's starting to tell me, oh, okay, I really don't have access to that video. It stopped assuming, and it was being more direct with me. But this is something I like to do. And because we don't have preferences, I've created a little file that I keep on my PC. So if I just open up a new tab, this is just a bookmark that goes directly to a local file on my PC. And these are just my preferences. So this is just a text file that has all of these little commands. And when I asked AI how to use AI before, it said, oh, you can list out these questions every time and it will help guide your experience. So I like to say, this is my list of preferences. My name is Shanton, and I was playing around with this. So say, my name is Shanton, and I'm going to change your name to Jarvis for the rest of this session. So if anyone knows Iron Man, either the movie or the comic book, Jarvis was his AI assistant. So I thought it would be funny to make him make my AI Jarvis. I told it to explicitly state anytime it's making inferences or assumptions like we just looked at. Please don't speculate. So I played with a lot of these settings. And if I didn't add every single one of these statements about telling it to not make inferences, it would still come back with inferences every now and then. So getting to this level of repetition eventually got me to the point where it stopped doing that. And then I ended with make sure you explain things in a step-by-step detail, use simple language. I told it can take up to 5 minutes to respond. And this is my hope that, then confirm preferences when summarizing any third-party content. So if you are going to use third-party content, at least let me know. Then I always end it with a test. I tell it to tell me its name because its name should be Jarvis, and then to summarize the following video. And I give it that video that gave me problems in the past. So let me copy this. So typically I just copy that whole page. Then I go into my AI session. I paste it and I just hit enter. And it just takes a couple seconds to come back typically. And it says, hi, my name's Jarvis. And unfortunately, I don't have access to that video. So it didn't try to summarize the video. And now I know that, all right, my AI is ready to go for the day. It's doing what I want it to do based on the preferences I've given it. So just a tip from my experience there. So this is just repeating that. And you can have fun with your preferences. So I told it to be Jarvis, but you can also tell it to change the way it speaks. So a lot of people say, tell it to be Ted Lasso. You can tell it to talk back in the style of Ted Lasso because he's really funny if anyone's seen that show. I joked around, I told it to speak like Yoda. So I would like to change your name to Yoda now, speak in the style of Yoda, and then re-summarize the preferences for this session. So I went to the next screen and it says, very well, Yoda I am. Preferences for this session, re-summarize I will. So it's starting to speak backwards like Yoda, and you have some fun with it. I think that's one of the best things about playing with the AI tools is finding ways to have fun while you're doing it, because it just keeps it interesting for you, helps you keep learning in a fun way, which keeps you engaged. But speaking like Yoda is not great. So as I was using this Yoda session, I was asking it more questions, and trying to read everything in the form of Yoda kind of gets annoying. So eventually I switched the style back. So you find that balance of things to do here. But in this next question, I just asked it different things I can ask the AI, like we talked about earlier. And it's summarizing these in a Yoda fashion. But that's it for this section about the AI sandbox tools. And then I'll start talking about some real world examples where I kind of train myself using the AI tools. So while David's here, are there any questions about the AI sandboxes? And I'll give a couple seconds. Very surprised there are no questions. All right, I will move on to the next section. All right, so the next section here is section 3, AI-led training. So in this section here, I'm still using Claude Instant, but now I'm using it for a specific purpose. So in this scenario here, this is where I go back to what we talked about at the start of the class. I needed to use AI to solve a problem I was having. I needed to learn how to publish content in our new Posit data science tool for a project I was working on. So I said, all right, how do so the Posit data science tool uses R, the R language. So I needed to write some code in R and then publish it up to this tool. That's holistically what I was trying to get done. So I said, Jarvis, please explain to me in step-by-step form how I can create a simple sample in RStudio desktop and publish it to the web in my client-managed version of Posit Connect. Lots of words, and it will give me lots of detail back. So it says, great, yeah, here you go. Here are some step-by-step instructions for creating a simple sample in RStudio desktop. And it gives me like literally click by click what I need to do. And sometimes those steps aren't clear. And because it keeps that cache and it keeps that reference handy, I can ask it questions. I can say, oh, question number 2 isn't really clear. How do I type in hello world or whatever that the question is? And then it will kind of break it down further for you. So you can use these in a way to get really direct and ask it questions as if you were asking a trainer in the room. So then it came back with those step-by-step instructions. So I said, all right, Jarvis, what should I do if no code is displaying in step 8? So I had run through the steps it had given me, and then there was a problem with one of the steps. In step 8, no code came back for some reason. And it says, okay, well, here are a few things you can do. And it gave me more troubleshooting examples of how I can fix the problem I was working on in different ways. And it usually gives you usually about 4 different ways you can try to approach a problem. So it did that, and that may be the way I had asked it to stylize the responses back to me. But it says double check your script, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then I said, all right, great. And my team was kind of joking with me that I speak really nicely to the AI. So I'm telling it, hey, that worked perfectly. Thanks, AI. Can you now provide me with a new sample R script that creates a simple chart? So the first example was just like a hello world example, very basic, but my team's all about data and analytics. So I wanted to be able to create some charts and graphs using that information. So now I'm just kind of probing it further, and we're trying to create new code to get to that point. So it says, all right, great. Here's a simple R script that will create a basic chart for you. And it gave me some simple code that I could plug into RStudio and kind of test out again. So just going through it all, you just keep working with it and keep testing it. And like it says here, the proof is in the pudding. In the end, I was able to create a handful of dashboards using a new application I had never really used before. I was able to migrate that content to our servers and then publish it for other people to be able to use and access. I was able to take simple text. I was able to then create charts. I was able to create plot points. And I just kind of kept playing with it and asking AI different questions. And it helped me get to the answer in the end. So in the end, I felt the power of AI, right? I was able to create things that I previously could only imagine. That's such a powerful feeling. It's always important to remember that AI is just a guide. It doesn't actually have the answers. It's feeding off of your information, your questions, your context to provide you with information back in a way that you'd like. And it can augment your skills. So I always try to say, don't be afraid of AI. AI itself isn't taking over your job. You should find ways to make your job better using AI. There are lots of ways you can improve the things that you do, make it more efficient, You can make it better results in the end by leveraging AI. I also mentioned it's not always faster. It all depends on what you're doing and how many times you need to iterate. But as you think about most things, the more times you iterate, typically the better the results will be in the end. So just continue to work at it. The more you play with it, the more you come up with good results and start to learn how to use it in better ways. But that was the end of the slide deck there. That's the end of the demo. We're right at the 2 hour or the 1 hour mark. So I just wanted to open it up for any questions that anyone has or see if there's any examples I can show. I know there's a lot going on in the chat, but I didn't see any of it. So is there anything in the chat we need to be aware of, Deirdre?
No, I think everything was covered. There's some folks that had to jump off. Yes, it was recorded and we will share that out. And Paige, for anyone who didn't see, has added some knowledge-based articles and some information on Adobe Firefly. Alex shared a fun tip on taking the YouTube transcript and copying and pasting that into AI to get the summary. So it was and then with the upgrade, we're getting rid of the school unit specific sandboxes and everyone will use the same URL. So I think, but nothing I think specific for you, Shannon.
Awesome. Well, that's all I had today. Yep. Anna?
Hi there, Shandon. Sorry. I had a conflict with the first 30 minutes, so I might have missed this. On the AI screen, you probably covered this just as I was coming on board. There's the arrow up, which is obviously that, yeah. The second down at the bottom where the arrow is next to that, yeah. So if you could click on that for a minute. So when you were talking about Claude Instant, this is what I missed. What are all of these options, and are we supposed to be using one specifically? Again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And David can probably speak to this a little better than I can, but these are the different large language models that are available to us to use. There's none that you're supposed to use specifically, but each has its own purpose. And maybe, Dave, I know there was some thought that went into why Claude Instant was the default. I wonder if you can speak to that a little.
Sure. So Claude Instant is sort of a good mix of being both cost effective and delivering good results. But agreed, like there's little context here to go off as to which is the right one, and Sandbox 2 will have a more robust, or I should say verbose description of each, as well as a recommended model. So in V2, it looks like our default recommended model will be GPT-4o, but we will have sort of a cost-effective but fast option and a more robust but slower option for each of the major providers with a little blurb about each. So you'll have a little more to go off. But other than that, the other key thing is the context window, which is how much data you can upload at once, which was particularly important with Sandbox V1 because we did file upload within that context window. So you could basically think of it as how large a file you could upload to ask questions of. Whereas in the new Sandbox, we're decoupling that so that it's far more robust in that you can upload multiple files and talk to them separately and independently of the size of that context window. All in all, V2 will have more information for you to make a better informed decision, and we'll give you a recommended option that's right for most folks.
That's super helpful. Thank you so much.
And I apologize, I have to drop to a 2 p.m., but excellent job, Shanton.
Yeah, thank you.
You all.
For the remaining folks, any other questions, or Anna, any additional questions?
No, this was super helpful. I didn't even realize that there were options under that dialog box. So yeah, I learned quite a few things. So thank you so much. Super helpful.
No problem. All right. If anyone does have any future questions, feel free to reach out to me directly, Shanton Anderson, or for maybe Deirdre, and we can figure out what else to do to take it from there. All right. Thanks so
Thank you
much,
so
everyone.
much.
Thank you, thank
Enjoy
you,
the rest of your
everyone.
afternoon.